Now, what is this? It's two waves equal and opposite. It's the electron wave and it's the positron wave, the mirror image of it. So we have two waves here equal and opposite. So we have a null. Can't be measured, right? It's a superconductor. Can't be measured. But it's not nothing. It's everything. What is the vibrational frequency of it? That's right. It's 0. Well, actually, it's not exactly 0. It has a width. A tiny little vibration that is exactly the vibration of the vacuum. It's called Planck's frequency. It is a frequency so far beyond anything we can imagine, we'll never produce it. Max Planck theorized exactly what it is. It's way, 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 way up there. You go way past gamma. It's way up here someplace. Where does it come from, though? It's the near infrared. Where do you find it? Where does God live? It's right there in the near infrared. Well, what is the frequency? It's way the heck gone up there. But it actually is produced right here, within us all. That's where it emanates from, at the electromagnetic 0 point. Between +1 and -1. Absolutely guarantee it. So where does he live? Right here within us. Where do you look for God? Go within yourself, because that's where you'll find it. Okay, let's go a little bit further. Let's go to the next one. Now, here is Hal Puthoff. Once again, everything for nothing. He's actually working with Casimir effects and explaining that there is this attraction between atoms, and it's a great, interesting paper to read. It's just an example of what he's writing. Let's go to the next one. In the Sciences magazine, here's one that I just gave Jay-Z a copy of, the Sciences, November, December 1994. And let's raise it up and see on the bottom, Beyond E = mc squared. A first glimpse of a universe without mass. And what they're saying, people, is that gravity is not real. Therefore, mass is not real. Therefore, time is not real. Now, Jay-Z was so delighted to see this. She says, gosh, Dave, I got to have a copy of this. This is exactly what I've been saying. Well, you know, we catch up. Just give us time. Anyway, Puthoff is the author that I'm talking to and working with. This is out of a paper called Gravity as a 0 Point Fluctuation Force. It's published in Physical Review A. It doesn't say on the sheet of paper, but it's Physical Review A, 1989. And what he did is he took Sakharov, the Nobel laureate's theory. Sakharov in 1968 published a paper where he said gravity is not a field. We're never going to find gravity if we look for it as a field, because gravity is produced when the protons, neutrons, and electrons of matter interact with the vacuum energy. It's this bathing and swimming they're doing all the time with this vacuum energy, that interaction is what produces what we call gravity. Now, he came up with this theory in 1968. Now, it's a great theory, except, you know, where's the reality? You know, it's a great theory, but, you know, he says if you take matter away, you don't have gravity. Matter has to be there for there to be gravity, because matter produces what we call gravity. Okay? So, anyway, Hal Puthoff took that theory and he says, I'm going to develop the mathematics of this. So here he does this whole paper on the mathematics of 0 point energy. And in his calculations and in the mathematics, he said equation 56 was derived for the case in which 3 degrees of freedom for particle motion are assumed. Now that's most atoms in the universe are 3 degrees of motion. But for the 2-dimensional jitterbug motion assumed in our case with the number of dimensions equal to 2, geometric considerations require that the gravitational attraction be reduced by a factor of n divided by 3 squared, or 4/9. So his mathematics says that when matter begins to interact in 2 dimensions, as opposed to 3 dimensions, it should lose 4/9 of its gravitational weight, or it should weigh 56%. Which is exactly what our stuff did. So I said, hey, this is really nifty. This is the way physics is supposed to work, people. You're supposed to write out a theory and then prove it experimentally. That's the way it's supposed to work. Unfortunately, it never works that way. What we do is we see something we can't explain, then we write physics to explain it. But in this case, they actually did it right. They actually theorized this, and our stuff actually weighs the 5/9. When it goes snow white, it loses 4/9 of its gravitational attraction. Now this is really important because these are the spirit atoms. These are the atoms that are in your body that flow the light of life. These are the atoms that are 5/9 here and 4/9 in the 5th dimension, where all of us are connected. So the obvious question is, where does the 4/9 go? It's in the 5th dimension. Who's laughing at that? You think that's funny? You know, it's real simple. You got 5/9 here. Where's the 4/9? What's in the 5th dimension? So your 5/9 here and your 4/9 gone. Or if you like it better, let's just say your 4/9 with God. Does that make you feel more comfortable? Your 4/9 with God, where all of us are with Him in that same place. Okay? So if you think about somebody over there, there is a connection of 4/9 of you, your spirit, with them. Right? Okay. So there's the physical connection with people through the 5th dimension. Now let's go a little further with what Hal showed me when I was down there. This is out of Classical Quantum Gravity, Volume 11, 1994. The warp drive hyper-fast travel within general relativity. It is now shown within the framework of general relativity and without the introduction of wormholes, it is possible to modify a space-time in a way that allows a spaceship to travel with an arbitrarily large speed by a purely local expansion of space-time behind the spaceship and an opposite contraction in front of it. Motion faster than the speed of light as seen by observers outside the disturbed region is possible. The resulting distortion is reminiscent of a warp drive of science fiction. However, just as happens with wormholes, exotic matter will be needed in order to generate a distortion of space-time like the ones discussed here. So what we got to get is exotic matter. What's exotic matter? Matter that has less than its true gravitational attraction. So he shows me, he says, Dave, look here. He said, here is space-time. It can be depicted graphically. And he says, when you lose gravitational attraction, it's gravity that determines your space-time. So literally, when you lose 4/9 of your gravitational attraction, you're actually bending space-time. You know, I never thought about that. You're right. You're bending space-time. And he says, well, Dave, even better yet, he says, what we really need is a material that has no gravitational attraction at all. A material that weighs less than nothing. Exotic matter. Pure and simple. Less than nothing. And I said, well, look at my graphs, look at my charts. And I showed him the graphs I showed you guys. And he looked at me and he says, Dave, when it weighs less than nothing, you shouldn't be able to see it. I said, that's right, that's right. He says, you know why you can't see it? It's no longer in these 3 dimensions. It has withdrawn all into the 5th dimension. Now the implications here, people, are really serious. It really is serious. Let's go to the next one. I know, you already know about this. Yeah, here is Putoff's, he's actually commenting on this article about Miguel Albuquerque. He's talking about his paper. He's talking about the theory. Let's go to his summary, the very last page here, the next one. It actually says, therefore, the proper conclusion to be drawn by consideration of engineered metric vacuum energy effects is that with sufficient technological means as to appear magic at present, or to use Arthur C. Clarke's phrase characterizing a highly advanced technological civilization, travel at speeds exceeding the conventional velocity of light could occur without the violation of fundamental physical laws. And we might add, this could in principle be done without recourse to concepts as extreme as wormhole transversal. However, clearly exotic matter field states, e.g. macroscopic Casimir-like negative energy density vacuum states, which is exactly what I showed you, less than no gravitational attraction. As a result, the possibility of reduced time interstellar travel, either by advanced extraterrestrial civilizations at present or ourselves in the future, is not, as naive consideration might hold, fundamentally constrained by physical principles. And that's just a summary of that. We'll take that off too. Okay, so what they're saying, people, is that your consciousness, the atoms of your consciousness, can literally travel in space-time. They can go anywhere they want to go, anytime they want. The problem is your physical body has to stay here. Now, the ancient Egyptians, I think, understood this better than anybody. They said we have a physical body that we must feed physical food to so we can grow and become what we're meant to be. But they also said we have a light body, which they call the Ka, and they said you have to feed your light body so it can grow and become what it's meant to be. Well, when you feed your light body, you're feeding your consciousness. You're actually feeding it with the asymmetrically deformed high-spin states of atoms. But these atoms in your body literally interact with the DNA. They literally interact with the cells of your body. They actually interact with the, what do you call them, carbules? And when you understand that when they are sufficient density in your body, so that quantum coherence occurs, that literally everything begins to act as one. And they are capable of totally bending space-time. Totally bending space-time, where even your material body disappears. Now, I'd like for you to ponder this just a little bit, because this is really heavy duty, what I'm sharing with you. Because when you come to the point that you really accept this, it's kind of like the guy going over Niagara Falls on a tightrope. I tell you about this one? All right, there's this guy walking over Niagara Falls, and he's walking on this tightrope, and he's pushing a wheelbarrow. And he's going across the Niagara Falls pushing this wheelbarrow. And all these people are gathered on the side of Niagara Falls, and they're cheering him on. They're rooting and hollering for him. Oh, come on, come on, come on. And he's coming along, and they're just, oh, come on, we know you can make it. And he's coming along. He finally gets to the other side, he steps off the tightrope. And they go, yay, we knew you were going to make it. We knew you were going to make it. And he says, do you think I can go back? Oh, yeah, we know you can go back. He says, do you have faith I can go back? And they says, yeah, we have faith. And he says, get in the wheelbarrow. There's just, you need to see how I learned about this information and how I came to be interested in it. And so for those people who didn't see it, I'm going to show you just a little bit of it here so we can see what's going on. Then I want to talk about what we're actually doing with it, what's been done, what some of the results are, more specifically than I did last time, so you can understand it. Okay. Okay. This is Lapidus in Pursuit of Gold. Just take it off, go to the next one. This is just the introduction. What it says is, owing to the disparagement cast on the art of alchemy in modern times by those who failed to unearth its secrets, it has been bypassed by science and has become obscured to the point where few people even clearly understand what it stands for. If asked what is alchemy, the short answer might be the search for the philosopher's stone. This, however, is no stone, but a powder, with the power to transmute base metals into gold or silver. Anyway, they're talking about the elixir of life. Of course, it gets into, all the aspects of it and everything, but, I was really surprised to find out that the stone was, in fact, not a stone. This is this, as you recall, I presented to you last time, this is from the Egyptian Book of the Dead. This is the oldest Book of the Dead, and the Papyrus of Ani. It's actually by Budge. And what this is about, you have to understand that in Old Kingdom Egypt, only the Pharaoh and the high priest were allowed access to this information. This was considered sacred information. This was information that wasn't shared with the general public. In Old Kingdom Egypt, they believed that you had a light body, they believed you had a physical body. And they believed you had to feed your physical body, but you also had to feed your light body. And what they said you fed your light body with is the Shefa food, which was actually the food of the light body. Now, for a long time, people have studied this and said, well, what is the Shefa food? What were they talking about the Shefa food? And so, you know, when I got this book, I began to read it, and I said, you know, this is talking about, in Old Kingdom Egypt, they believed that the Pharaoh never died. They believed that the Pharaoh ascended the stairway to heaven, or Jacob's ladder. That actually he never died, he ascended to heaven. And so the Pharaoh and the high priest never died. And do you know that they've never found the body of a high priest or a Pharaoh in Old Kingdom Egypt? They've never ever found the body of one of them. They found these edifices that they built, these structures in commemorating their rule, but they never found the body of a high priest or a Pharaoh. Because according to their text, they didn't die. They ascended the stairway to heaven. And actually, if you get to reading what it says that they were told to travel to the east, across the Sea of Reeds, across the desert, over the mountains, across the desert, until they came to the island where the man who survived the flood lived. And that's where they ascended the stairway to heaven. Now, if you read over in the Tigris-Euphrates Valley, when you get to reading about what they thought and what they were teaching, you find out about this fellow called Gilgamesh. And Gilgamesh was one of the first mortal kings that lived here on earth, and he was after the elixir of life. And he wanted to know how to find it. They told him to travel to the land where the sun rises. Well, you assume that's also to the east, but in fact, it's Arabia, the land of the rising sun. And so he traveled down the river into the ocean and to the island where the man who survived the flood lived, after the elixir of life. That's where he was going, which happens to be the same place. It's the island of Bahrain. And it's actually the island of Bahrain has been excavated in recent years by researchers, and they have found that at the island of Bahrain, they have actually found the foundations and the ruins of this city called Dilmun, which is actually where Gilgamesh was told to travel, to the land of Dilmun, or Tilman, either way. And this is where you got the key to immortality, where Noah, as we know him, actually lived. Anyway, they've actually found the city. It did exist. And when they dug up the seals from that city, they found that the seal was the tree of life. That was one of the most important seals they had on their rings. Anyway, 2500 BC, mind you, this is not recent, this isn't New Age, this is 2500 BC. They're talking about the Pharaoh actually and what he goes through as he dies. And it keeps asking this question, what then is it? Goes a little further and it says, you know, which it produces the Shefa food of the gods behind the shrine. And it goes on further, it says, O ye gods who are in the present, grant me your two arms. I shall come into existence among you. And then it asks the question, what then is it? The drops of blood it is that comes forth from the phallus of Ra. Well, in Egypt they talked about the god Ra, the light god, actually circumcised himself, and then the blood from his penis mixed with the semen from his penis, and the semen in fact was the spirit, and the blood was the physical body. And that's the combination of the two. Anyway, I strongly recommend that you get a copy of this book. It's in paperback, and just go through it and highlight every time it asks this question, what then is it? You know, it talks about the fighting between the good and the bad, and then it asks the question, what then is it? You know, it's storing excrement in the face of Horus. It carried off the testicles of Set, which the symbol of this is always the testicles or the penis. And then it says, who raises up the hair at the time of the storms in the sky, and then asks the question, what then is it? It is the right eye of Ra, in its raging against his hereafter. Thoth raises up the hair on the third eye, and he bringeth into the eye, living, healthy, and sound without defect. It's a perfecting. And then it asks the question down here once again, what then is it? Let's go to the next. And this is the complete works of Josephus, and we'll just take that and as a reference and go to the next one. This is talking about the manna, all the references to the manna, how much was taken, what does it mean, and it says, now the Hebrews call this food manna, for the particle man in our language is the asking of a question. What is it? So the word manna literally means in Hebrew a question. What is it? It's the very same exact words they were using in Old Kingdom Egypt. The what is it? Or what then is it? Okay? There was actually 3 descriptions that they directly spoke of this. They called it the golden tear from the eye of Horus. Okay, you've all seen the eye of Horus with the eyelash and the golden tear. The eyelash is a symbol of the veil, or lifting of the veil, so that you have a clear eye, which they talked about, lifting up the eyelash so the eye is clear, and then the golden tear is always associated with it. It was also called that which issues from the mouth of the Creator, the spittle, that which issues from the mouth of the Creator, the spittle, or is also referred to as the semen of the Father in heaven. Okay, now these were very literal people. They were actually talking about the excrements of God, the bodily excrements of God. The golden tear, the spittle, or the semen of the Father in heaven. These are 3 terms they used to describe it. They were very graphic people. They were trying to literally explain what it looks like. If you take the white powder of gold, or the iridium, and you mix it with water in a vial, it becomes kind of an opalescent white gelatinous looking substance. It looks just like semen. Exactly. Okay? Now, I want to say this to you. How many times have you heard, cleanse yourself, purify yourself, prepare yourself like a bride in the bridal chamber to receive the Father? Okay? It's the basis of every religion. It's the Egyptian rite of passage. Cleanse yourself, purify yourself, prepare yourself to receive the Father in the bridal chamber. What happens in the bridal chamber? You become, the marriage is consummated, you become inseminated. And literally the semen of the Father in heaven goes into your body and cleanses and purifies and perfects all of the tissue, all of the cells, all of the damage from carcinogens. Everything is perfected as it's meant to be in your prime. And you are born again as a son of God, not a son of man. Okay, that is it, people. That is it verbatim. And it comes from 3000 BC. Did you know over in the Tigris-Euphrates Valley that when Zecharia Sitchin was doing his research over there, that the gods were always depicted as having horns? The gods were always depicted as having horns. What did the horn stand for? The word hue is the high frequency sound. H-U-E. We are the human, the man who can hear the sound. What's the horn? It's a symbol of bringing the sound from up here down into the brain. This is the symbol for the gods, the ones who could hear the sound. The sound came down in their brain. Okay? It's the opening of the 8th chakra. And it's always depicted as 2 horns. Did you know that Moses, when they were doing the chapel seating, what they call it, the Sistine Chapel, that he wanted to paint horns on Moses' head? Because in the Bible it says he was horny. And he wanted to put the horns on his head, and the Pope just says, no way. That's Satan. We can't have that. Well, you know, what they didn't understand is what the symbolism stood for, what it meant. And it was one who could hear the sound. Okay? Let's go to the next slide. Now this is from Ages in Chaos by Immanuel Velikovsky. It says the showbread was obviously not of flour, but of silver or gold. In the book of Exodus, it is said that the showbread was made by Bezaleel, who was a goldsmith. Showbread is pictured on the bas relief of Karnak in the form of a cone, and it bears the explanation, white bread. Okay, so let's see what the temple of Karnak shows. Now this is the plunder that supposedly came from the temple of Solomon. Right here is the symbol for gold. Right here's the symbol for gold. Right here's the symbol for gold. Here's a symbol for gold. Here's a symbol for gold. These things that look like spiders here are the Egyptian symbol for gold. Okay? This one, this one, this one. Anyway, all of your golden items are listed on this first because they're the more valuable. Now, this thing right here is called the white bread, or the showbread. And they call it the white bread or the showbread. And they claim that this was made by Bezaleel the goldsmith. All right, it's the bread of the presence of God. It actually wasn't called showbread, it was the bread of the presence of God. Well, I just showed you where in Egypt they said, I shall come into your presence. You know, it was the bread of the presence of the gods that you took. It was the bread that allowed you to hear and see the gods. Okay, let's go to the next slide. Now, this is Stairway to Heaven by Zachariah Sitchin. The term Ben in its hieroglyphic depiction, well, I'll be darned, here it is again. In time, indeed, acquired the connotations of virility and reproduction, and could well have been the source of the meaning male offspring that Ben has in Hebrew. In addition to virility and reproduction, the shrine also acquired the attributes of rejuvenation. This in turn gave rise to the legend of the Ben bird, which the Greeks who had visited Egypt called the phoenix. Heliopolis and its healing waters remained venerated until early Christian times. Local traditions claim that when Joseph and Mary escaped to Egypt with the child Jesus, they rested by the shrine's well. Kind of tying them together with this. Breaking the God Spell by Neil Freer, introduced by Zachariah Sitchin. This is a book that was just sent to me by Neil Freer. I found several references in it that are very important. First of all, I told you that remember the slide I showed you that platinum, gold, and mercury are the most deformed of all the elements? Okay, it says mercury is mentioned in the ancient texts, both Western and Eastern, related to power sources for flight. It says the Nephilim, who were the gods, had reached a state of technology that included some sort of atomic power, according to the accounts of their wars, and therefore knew of transmutation of elements. Yeah, if they're working with this stuff, they knew all about it. Okay, but let's go a little further. It's real specific, this next reference. Their physical immortality is consistently and explicitly related to an ingested substance. There is a record of pressure to conform being put on a member of their high council by threat of withholding the substance. I've actually talked to people who read this book and didn't see that, so you know, I have to get it out, point it out. Their physical immortality is consistently and explicitly related to an ingested substance. What substance? What is it? Okay, next one. Okay, the animal is not adored but revered as the incarnation of a specific function of which it is a symbol. Thus, Anubis as a black jackal is portrayed lying on a closed treasure chest under the title of Guardian of the Secret. Treated as netter, however, the Anubis is simply depicted as a jackal's head on a human body because the function characterizing the jackal is the netter of digestion, an essential function of life. Okay, here's the picture. The jackal, Anubis as Apawat, the opener of the ways, lying on the chest as guardian of the secret. The king offers him white bread, that is white nourishment. Everybody see that? You know, a picture's worth 1,000 words. If the Anubis is the digestive system, the king is offering the the shefa food, if you will, or the what is it, to the Anubis, or the digestive system. Now, you know, that's so clear. It's so obvious what that's saying once you know what that thing is. Now, what is that? It just happens to be, if you measure the base of it and you measure the height of it, it's 2.6 high by 1 bottom, or 2.6 to 1 deformation. How did they know that? Anyway, let's go next. This is from the Sign and the Seal by Graham Hancock. I'm getting too tired here, I'm not thinking. And he was actually checking out the first Gothic cathedral over in France called Chartres. And in the investigation of that, he said the arch tableau, which standing on the front of the porch on the supporting columns, was positioned exactly midway between Melchizedek, the Old Testament priest king, whose statue dominated the central bay, and the statue of the Queen of Sheba, which dominated the right-hand bay. Indeed, I found that I could draw a neat triangle connecting up all 3 pieces of sculpture from Melchizedek and the Queen of Sheba at the other end of the long base, and the Ark of the Covenant at the apex at 2 shorter sides. He also found out that the Ark was moving away from Melchizedek directly towards the Queen of Sheba. In his investigation, what he found is what also that Velikovsky found, is that in fact, what happened in Egypt is, in Old Kingdom Egypt, they had this knowledge, and the Pharaoh and the high priest were the only ones who really knew about it. And the Pharaoh was called a son of God. It was actually taught that he was a son of God. But actually what he did is he went through the Egyptian rite of passage, where he actually became a son of God through this transformational process. Now, they believed you could not lie to the Pharaoh. The Pharaoh knew all things. He was a god. And he knew whether you were lying to him or not. Okay? He wasn't a king or a Pharaoh like we think of kings. He actually was something far beyond what we know today as a king. Anyway, when you find out that, in fact, when they broke into the Great Pyramid, and they got past the swedge block that was down blocking the entrance into it, and they got up in the Queen's chamber and then up in the King's chamber, they were so disappointed because when they got in the King's chamber, there was no treasure. There was nothing but this white powder all over the ground. And so they swept this worthless light white powder up in a little sack, and they put it in the British Museum. You know, what they didn't understand is that, in fact, the Great Pyramid was, in fact, where this Egyptian rite of passage was administered. And what happened is this is what they gave the king when he was under the capstone. Now, the whole pyramid was actually polished limestone, was painted in rainbow colors of light, gradation, as you come up the capstone. When you got to the very top, you had the pyramidal capstone made of gold glass sitting on top of it. It was a natural superconductor literally sitting on top of the capstone, painted in all the rainbow colors. Can you imagine what that looked like at night, coming across the desert, see this huge pyramid out there just glowing at night? And tremendous. And did you know that the capstone, by being a perfect superconductor, was literally in this 5th dimension where there is no time? And so, in fact, the king who was in the king's chamber was within the Meissner field of the superconductor. And so when he thought, other people who were in a pyramid just like it on another solar system and another galaxy actually could communicate telepathically with him. How many books you read about it being a telecommunication device? Well, this is the way it worked. And you had to be within that field. That's why the king's chamber is right underneath the capstone. Okay, let's go to the next slide. This is also talking about the chalice he had. It said that the chalice and the object within it thus meant to represent the bread and the wine, the symbols of the Eucharist. And another caption, its photograph of the statue with these words, Melchizedek bearing the grail cup out of which comes the stone. Now that's actually the caption on in the Cathedral of Chartres, where it's the only chapel that has a statue of Melchizedek. And he's holding a grail, and in the grail is the stone. Okay, who is Melchizedek? Melchizedek was one of the sons of Noah. He was Shem. It says in the Bible that Melchizedek had no earthly father or earthly mother. He had been born again as the Son of God. He lived 900 and some years. Okay, he had no earthly father or earthly mother because he had been born again. So he was Melchizedek. And that's the basis of the Melchizedek priesthood. Because it's named after. It goes down through Abraham into Egypt, back out of Egypt with Moses, then down to the time of the first temple and the destruction of the first temple. I went to Rabbi Plotkin at Temple Beth Israel in Phoenix. I said, Rabbi, have you ever heard of the white powdered gold? He says, oh yeah, Dave. But so as far as we know, no one's known how to make it since the destruction of the first temple. And I said, would it bother you if you found out I had the U.S. and worldwide patent position on it? And his reaction was, Dave, you've got a hell of a bunch of decisions to make in your life, don't you? What he said to me, and this is in the very beginning when I began to look into it, he says, Dave, this is the magic. But it can be black magic or it can be white magic, depending on who has it. Now that was his response. And I began to take this real seriously. It's something that really bothered me for a long time. In my opinion, this brings about the perfecting of the body. But it doesn't perfect the mind. Okay, and so you either become the Christ or you become the Antichrist. You become all good or you become all bad. But the beautiful is there's no gray area. There's no in between. You go this way or you go that way. It's one or the other. It's called the dividing sword. Okay? It is the sword that divides. You is in or you is out, but there's no in between. It's real simple. You know, you do it or you don't do it. If you do it, you're in. If you don't do it, you're out. And to me, there's no way to be in between. There's no way to sit a fence on this. Anyway, let's go to the next one. He was doing work on finding history about this. He found a book published in London in 1884 by the Religious Tract Society entitled Fresh Lights from the Ancient Monuments. It was written by A.H. Sayce, who was Deputy Professor of Philology at Oxford University. Remembering that E.A. Wallace Budge, one of the great authorities on Egyptian religion, which is what I told you wrote the Papyrus of Ani, had held Sayce in the highest regard, describing him as a distinguished scholar, I opened the book to a chapter entitled The Exodus Out of Egypt and read that in Sayce's opinion, the law and ritual of the Israelites had been derived from many sources. Amongst these were various festivals and fasts in which the gods were carried in processions in ships, which, as we learn from the sculptures, resembled in form the Hebrew ark and were borne on men's shoulders by means of staves. But you remember looking at where we showed the guardian of the secret, it looked just like the Ark of the Covenant with staves and a box and the apple on top of it. Encouraged by the support for my speculations that the distinguished 19th century professor had given me, I looked further through the reference books at my disposal and was able to confirm that ship-like arks carried during the Apet ceremonies had indeed contained gods, or rather small statues of various deities in the Egyptian pantheons. These statues had been made of stone, and thus it seemed to me were not far removed in concept from the stone tablets of the testimony that had supposedly been lodged inside the Ark of the Covenant and that the Israelites had regarded as embodying their God. As one Hebrew scholar put it in a seminal paper published in the 1920s, the tradition of the two sacred stone tablets within the Ark would point strongly to the conclusion that the original contents of the Ark must have been a sacred stone, which was either conceived of as the deity himself or as the object in which the deity was thought to reside permanently. Now, in the Bible, it talks about that the Ark of the Covenant actually levitated, and people had to hang on to it to keep it from floating away. Now, how could it levitate? Unless it was a superconductor. Okay? Now, in the Ark was the stones. Now, it says that actually, when they got to Mount Sinai, that Moses went up on Mount Sinai and they said that there was fire and smoke like a furnace was operating on Mount Sinai? You know why it seemed that way? There was a furnace operating on Mount Sinai. And there was fire and there's smoke and there's a furnace, because he was making the gold powder into the gold glass. Did you know that these things we call eyelashes were actually called bushes in Egypt? And the burning bush was the enlightened third eye? Wow. That they actually call this 2500 BC, they referred to it as the burning bush, as the enlightened third eye. And so Moses went up on Mount Sinai and looked upon the burning bush. In other words, he was one with God, and God gave him the commandments. And he came down from Mount Sinai and he went to the Hebrew people, and what had they done? They had made a golden calf. And so what did he do? He burned it to ashes and he fed it to them. Now, if you actually read Exodus, it's like there's two books. There's a time up to Mount Sinai when God dwelt with the covenant people. What does the word covenant mean? To eat bread with. To eat bread with. The covenant people were to eat bread with God. Did you know there's only one hieroglyphic symbol on the Great Pyramid? One word. It's a hieroglyphic symbol. And it's on the third veil as you go into the king's chamber. It's the word bread. The whole Great Pyramid, and there's one word. It's called bread. Coincidence. And all they found was white powder in it. Anyway, it's interesting that in fact from the time of the Hebrew people having this white powder, that you have the period of the great prophets, you have the period of the first temple, you have the period through where literally David and Solomon ruled the world. They literally ran things all over the world. Before that, the Egyptians did. Now the Hebrew people do. And then what happens? Solomon, along comes this Sheba. Now who was Sheba? She was Hatshepsut, the Pharaoh queen of Upper Egypt. She was a black woman. Actually more chocolate brown, I think would be more correct. Anyway, she came to the land of Punt, where Solomon lived. And it describes how in Egypt how she went to the land of Punt. She went down the terraced highways and came up to this structures described exactly as the Temple of Solomon. Anyway, she thought Solomon a pretty neat guy, and so they got it on. She became pregnant. So she returns back to Egypt to have her baby. And when the child, who she named Menelik, was 21 years old, he goes back to Jerusalem. He says, "Daddy, I'm here." And Solomon says, "Yes, you are my son." Now the Levites were beside themselves. The Levites, you know this thing about racial purity. You know, you just don't do things like this. And so the Levites said, if that's your eldest son, then he's going to be the next king of Jerusalem. The Levite says, you got to send him away, Solomon. You got to send him away. You can't let him be the king of Jerusalem. And Solomon, in his infinite wisdom, said, okay, if my son must leave, so must your eldest sons leave. And you know the Levites did it? They sent away their eldest sons because they didn't want this man who was half black, half white to be the king of Jerusalem. So, the eldest sons were the ones who blood right were to be the next high priest. And so what they do, they pick up the Ark of the Covenant and they take it out of the country with them. Well, by the time that the Levites realize what's happened, they get their army together, they go after them, and they're already into Egypt. And the army gets up there at the borders of Egypt, they say, whoa, wait a minute. Do we want to take the Hebrew army into Egypt after the son of the Pharaoh? No, I don't think so. They turn around and went back. Well, they don't like to talk about this. They don't like to say, we screwed up, we lost the Ark of the Covenant. But in fact, it went to the island of Elephantine, where actually they built an exact duplicate of the Temple of Solomon, and they kept the Ark of the Covenant in the island of Elephantine. And do you know that German researchers have excavated on the island of Elephantine and have found an exact duplicate of the Temple of Solomon. The foundations are exactly the dimensions of the Temple of Solomon. And there it was there for hundreds of years, and it finally was moved up into Ethiopia, where it's kept on an island out on a lake in Ethiopia. And that's where it was at the time the Templars were in Jerusalem. And that's where all the stories about the container of the essence of life come from, is about this castle out on this island with the container of the essence of life. And when it presents itself, you must ask the right question. What is it? Anyway, let's see the next one. Anyway, here is from the Dead Sea Scrolls Uncovered. This is actually the scriptures that nobody could get translated for the longest time. You know, they've had them for 35, 40 years. Nobody could translate them. And finally, Mrs. Bechtel smuggles them out of Jerusalem and turns them over to the universities and says, here they are. Well, Eisenman and Wise got copies of them, and within a year's time, they had them all translated. Anyway, he calls the Essenes and Zealots. The thing that was unique about them is they would not call any man Lord. So they could not submit to the rule of Caesar as being God here on earth. They said, we only have one God, and we can't call Caesar God. But by far the most important lines in Fragment 1, Column 1 are lines 6 through 8 and 11 through 13, referring to releasing the captives, making the blind see, raising up the downtrodden, and resurrecting the dead. The last illusion is not to be doubted. So who were the Essenes? Who were these Essenes that could resurrect the dead, make the blind see? These were the Melchizedek priests. That with the destruction of the first temple, the Ark of the Covenant was lost, that they literally took the sacred scriptures out in the desert and set up a monk-like community where they always dressed in white. And they said, we're not going to pervert the temple. We will wait here for the coming of the Messiah, that they knew by prophecy would come because they could see all truth. Now they literally could make the blind see and resurrect the dead. Okay. They also talk about the Messianic leader, or the Nazi. And for those people who just think Nazi, they think Hitler. No, sir, that was an old word. They just perverted it and used it inappropriately. Imagery related to radiance of light pervading the heavenly abode. Let's go to the next slide. For those of you who followed the actual Dead Sea Scrolls, all the first Dead Sea Scrolls talked about the righteous teacher. And all this conjecture, was the righteous teacher Moses? Was the righteous teacher Christ? Was the righteous teacher a rabbi we don't know about? There was all this nervousness about who's the righteous teacher. Well, the violent ones of the Gentiles, and take vengeance on the wicked priest for what he did to the righteous teacher, i.e. swallowed him or destroyed him. Not only do they describe how the wicked priest pursued the righteous teacher to swallow or consume him. So you could swallow the teacher of righteousness. So was the teacher of righteousness a man? No. The teacher of righteousness was the Spirit. The teacher of righteousness was the Spirit. The teacher of the right thing was the Spirit. Because you can sin against God and you can be forgiven. And you can sin against Christ and be forgiven. There's only one unforgivable sin, and that's to sin against the Spirit or the Holy Ghost. Because in fact the Spirit, when you are filled with the Spirit, as the high priest who went behind the veil of the Holy Ghost, partook of the bread of the presence of God, he was filled with the Spirit and he knew all things. So to sin is a sin of knowingness. To sin is you know you're sinning when you sin. And so it's an unforgivable sin, because you know it's a sin when you do it. Do you understand? But the high priesthood has been gone since the last Melchizedek priest. It was actually James, Peter, and John. They were the last ones. Anyway, they also talk about here the Merkabah mysticism, which a lot of you know about. The Merkabah, love, spirit, soul. That's actually an Egyptian word. Love, spirit, soul. Merkabah. Okay? You know, in the Dead Sea Scrolls, if you read this carefully, the Dead Sea Scrolls Uncovered, you'll find out that the Essenes believed they had angels living in their community. And you find out that John the Baptist was an Essene, that many of the disciples were Essenes, and that Mary was an Essene. But in fact, Mary continued in the temple as a dove, educated there, and received her food from the hand of an angel. This is from the forgotten books of the Bible, from the time of Christ. That Mary was fed by an angel. She was actually raised as a high priest. You ever notice that Mary always has this halo about her when they always paint Mary? And Christ always has this halo? Poor Joseph, he don't get no halo. But see, Mary was the key here. Mary was filled with the light. Mary was raised as a high priest. Mary was filled with the Spirit. Mary had the teacher of righteousness. And it seems to take about 9 to 10 months for this transformational process to take place. And what's the gestation period? 9 months. And so when she became pregnant and the child developed and grew in her body in the light, when he was born a son of God on his birth. He was actually born a son of God on his birth. He did not have to go through the Egyptian rite of passage. Christ said, "Greater things than I have done, you shall do also." In other words, you too are to be a son of God. You too have that promise from Christ himself, that you too will be a son of God. In the end times, we're to be a nation of high priests, not an elect high priesthood. In the end times, we are to put on our crown and literally become one with God. And that's the promise that he made to us. Next one. This is from the book Holy Blood, Holy Grail. Well, I know that many brave knights dwell with the Grail at Munslevet, or what do you pronounce it. Always when they ride out, as they often do so, as to seek adventure, they do so for their sins, these Templars. Whether the reward be defeat or victory, a valiant host lives there, and I will tell you how they are sustained. They live from a stone of purest kind. If you do not know it, it shall here be named to you. It is called the lapsus elixis. By the power of that stone, the phoenix burns to ashes, but the ashes give him life again. Thus does the phoenix molt and changes plumage, which afterwards is bright and shining and as lovely as before. There never was a human so ill but that if one day he sees the stone, he cannot die within the week that follows, and in looks he will not fade. His appearance will stay the same, be it maid or man, as on the day he saw the stone. The same as when the best years of his life began, and though he should see the stone for 200 years, he will never change, save that his hair might perhaps turn gray. Such power does the stone give a man that flesh and bones are at once made young again. The stone is also called the Grail. What happened is that when the Templars were in Jerusalem, that the very same time the Templars in Jerusalem, that the descendant of the Davidic bloodline in Ethiopia had been thrown off the throne by a coup. And he just happened to be in Jerusalem at the same time. And so the Templars met with him, and he says, "You take me back, put me back on the throne, and I'll let you care for the Ark of the Covenant." And so the Templars actually cut a deal where they went to Ethiopia, got control of the Ark of the Covenant, and they actually cared for the Ark of the Covenant. And that's where all the myths and all the legends about the Grail and them caring for this stone. This is from Abraham Gileadi. It's a Hebrew scholar, literary analyst, holds a PhD in ancient studies. It's talked the last days, and we'll see. I have concluded the arm of the Lord refers to a servant of the Lord who is a descendant of David, who precedes Jesus' second coming. That servant is known in the book of Isaiah by a number of metaphors, particularly the ensign and the arm. Through the instrumentality of the servant, the same restoration of Israel and Judah that the prophet Joseph Smith attributes to a latter-day David. Israel and Judah's conversion and restoration, Joseph predicted, will occur in a day of power. according to the 2 Isaiah chapters, a servant of the Lord who at first is hidden from the world, but whom the Lord reveals will gather and restore latter-day Israel. In that task, righteous Gentiles will assist him, and that the Lord's servant performs when the Gentiles assist him. It says, such a servant will not announce himself, but will be called of God, as was David anciently through the prophet Samuel. It says, the Lord's work is preeminently revelatory in nature. It brings to light knowledge hidden up from the foundation of the world because of unbelief. Great and marvelous knowledge appears in the sealed portion of the Book of Mormon and other books. Such knowledge will be revealed initially among the believing Gentiles, and from these Gentiles will go forth to the house of Israel. This additional revelation contains the greater things or more important truths. In relation to them, the Book of Mormon is called the lesser part. Now, needless to say, I can tell you he's been excommunicated, but anyway. This new revelation includes the knowledge of the mysteries of God. It comprises all things shown to men in the past, things that were sealed up to come forth in their purity. They consist of the wonders of eternity, the mysteries of the kingdom of God from days of old and for ages to come. These great and marvelous revelations nonetheless come forth in time of wickedness among the Lord's people, and the new revelations therefore convince the Gentiles among whom they come forth of the error of their ways. The revelations show forth to all men the wickedness, abomination, and follies of the Gentiles, among whom the gospel has already gone forth. The Gentiles, when they become clean before the Lord and truly exercise faith in him and become sanctified, then is the time that the Lord will bring forth to them his great and marvelous revelations. The revealing of the Lord's work comes through his appointed seer or seers and involves translation of ancient records. And although a man declares the great and marvelous work to and these are the Israelites, they do not believe it. Okay, I told you that I found out that the Hebrew word for the golden tree was ormus. In Holy Blood, Holy Grail, the Order Rei de Sion, their first name was Ormus, or Ormuz. That's what their first name was, which stands for the golden tree. Okay, in Holy Blood, Holy Grail, they also talk about the family. The family is actually the Davidic bloodline, and it originates from the covenant made with David that he and his descendants would be kings forever. That's why Christ supposedly had to be of the Davidic bloodline. Okay? But what this shows you is the families that they've traced over there in Europe that are actually those who rule by divine right, which means they're a descendant of David, where they can show their lineage came from David and through Joseph Arimatheus and his daughter Anne the Jew, which is where the Dur-Anjou family came from. Anyway, the Dur-Anjous come down, they split into the De Lorraines and the De Guises. And the De Guises come on down to Henri de Guise through Marie de Guise, Mary Queen of Scots. But anyway, it comes on down like this. My cousin joined the Mormon church, and we find out that my great-great-great-great-great-great-grandmother was Hannah de Guise, daughter of Christopher de Guise, brother of Claude or Charles de Guise, who is this guy right here. Now, you begin to realize that something's going on here. Something is you know, you feel like Candid Cameras is setting you up for something. Since 1982, I just could not let go of the subject. It's something I had to do. You know, I spent a total of $8.7 million now over the course of this program getting all this information. My bankers told me I had to let it go in 1982, and I said, I can't. It's something. They said, well, Dave, it's esoteric. And I said, I can't let go of it. It's something I got to do. And then to find out this information, I mean, you just say, well, it obviously is not something that is for me to contest or to argue or to promote. There it is. There are millions of people out here that are probably of this bloodline. That what I ask myself is, why now? Why when Nostradamus worked for the De Guise family? Because he knew a descendant of this family was the one who should be the one who plants the golden tree of life. And he prophesied by the year 1999, the occult gold will be known to science. You know, you just sit there and scratch your head and say, gosh, you know, We just wait and see, won't we? This is Conversations with Nostradamus. Why don't we just skip on over this one? We just go to, we don't need this. We just go, this has got a bunch of stuff, but we covered it before. I think the most important one is the last one here, which is actually, no, the next page. No, next page. And no reference. Should be a reference for that. No, no, that one we want, but we got them in reverse order. Now that just put those we want, but we want them in reverse order. So take the last one. Now one more behind that. We want that one, but I sorted through them. This one, last reference here. I'm not going to put you all to sleep. The Book of Knowledge, the Keys of Enoch. How many people know this book? Yeah, this is an alert group. Yeah. Okay, let's go to the first reference now, which is a reference to the manna. This one right here. This one. Let's put that one on. Okay, this is on page 141. He showed me a family eating manna, the food of light, glowing within the home. Manna, the food of light. Okay, let's go to the next reference. Now, I have to tell you people, you know, in my work, I began to first we did the medicine. And we worked with dogs, and we worked with HIV, and we worked with cancer, and we worked with all the standard materials. But you know, obviously this is not a medicine. If what this material is to enlighten and raise man's consciousness. So after we had seen and proved the effects here, we decided, well, let's go to see what happens in the body. How much, how long, what's going to happen. So we went to 500 milligrams. And the reason we came up with 500 milligrams is we actually took it from the ancient Vedic text. The ancient Vedic text says this is what you give to someone to get rid of any problems, any illnesses they got. And they said that you take 250 milligrams, so we said, well, we're giving rhodium and iridium, so let's make it 500, well, 250 of each. So we gave 500 milligrams to find out what would happen. And we decided, well, let's have the guy fast for 40 days. So he fasted for 9 days with nothing but water. He did a high colonic. Then he took this material at 500 milligrams for the next 40 days. Now what happened to him is after about 4 or 5 days, he begins to hear this very high frequency sound. It's a very high frequency sound. It sounds kind of like an electronic noise. It's kind of like a buzz way up, like the background noise on an old tube type radio. It's kind of an electronic sound. And he says, Dave, every day this sound's getting louder and louder and louder. But he said, now my brain's starting to oscillate, just back and forth inside my brain, like it's trying to get out of my skull. And he said, the only way I can stop it is to meditate and calm it down. Now he says, the sound causes my brain to oscillate. Now coincidentally, I met a lady right about then, and he was telling me about this sound, and I talked to her, and she says, Dave, I saw a UFO once, and right before the UFO appears, I hear this very high frequency sound. And all during the UFO experience, I hear this sound, and even after the UFO leaves, I can hear the sound for a while. But she said the craziest thing happened. My brain began to oscillate back and forth in my head. All during the UFO experience, her brain is oscillating back and forth. The only way I could calm it down is to concentrate to try stopping it so it would calm down. And she had no knowledge of what the man had told me. Okay? The reason this happens is you are not using the right and the left side of our brain the same. And so as they begin to equilibrate, there's this energy that's pulsing back and forth, trying to get into balance on the brain. Now this man's experiencing the very same thing that the UFO experience was about. And this continued to get louder and louder and louder until the end of 40 days, he said, Dave, it's like loudspeakers blurring this sound inside my head. Now I said, isn't this irritating? Doesn't this bother you? He says, not at all. He said, you just want to go within that sound and just meditate and dwell within the sound. It's kind of like a focal point that allows you to forget everything else around you. I said, that it? He said, that's it. Just lots of sound. So I said, all right, go off of it. Let's let that sound back and get back to normal. Well, he went back to eating normally after 42 days, and the sound doesn't go away. Well, coincidentally, people, in the Book of Knowledge, Keys of Enoch, he refers to it as he was taken up in a Merkabah vehicle. So here he's talking about the Merkabah vehicle as a UFO. Okay, so the Merkabah vehicle is a UFO. And yet right here he says, no, that's not it. The other one. Yeah, that's it. You changed them on me. Through a projection of light coming from the recorder cell or Merkabah activity, selected individuals can be reconnected with the Adam Kadmon, or the original condition man was created to be in before the fall, image, through a resonance operating through hyperdimensional space. So what is the Merkabah, love, spirit, soul? What is this? It's a 0 point. The electromagnetic 0 point. And literally these interdimensional craft come in and out through this doorway of the electromagnetic 0 point. They appear and then they disappear. They move in space-time. They appear to change directions we can't explain because they're moving in space-time. So, how can we have a projection of light coming from the recorder cell or Merkabah activity? Well, it's the electromagnetic 0 point. Okay? Anyway, some individuals receive an additional high-frequency resonance transmission operating in parallel phase with their normal resonance bonding. This additional high-frequency resonance operates as a subcarrier through these individual biotransducers to modulate paranormal energies. This explains how paranormal gifts can be received through the resonance of hyperdimensional space, which in turn can change the molecular arrangement of material in conventional space. Now this is very important to you to hear, people. What we're talking about is when this guy got to 5 months, we gave him 2,500 milligrams for 5 days. And what happened is the Kundalini started. He was just laying there in bed after having sex. He's just nice and relaxed and enjoying the afterglow, and all of a sudden here comes the Kundalini. He never had it before. He said, whoa, what's happening here? You know, for a woman it might have been all right. For a man, this is really confusing. You know, there's no erection, there's nothing, and yet it's going on. And he was all confused. He's embarrassed, in fact. He wouldn't tell me about it first. He didn't know what was going on. Anyway, he said it got to happening more often and more often and more often. He actually got up where he was having the Kundalini experience 10 times a day. He said, Dave, you just be walking down the street, and all of a sudden here it come. He said, you didn't work on it at all. I mean, it wasn't meditation, it wasn't introspection, it wasn't anything. It just happens without even working. Anyway, by adjusting the conventional resonance patterns, there can be a molecular infall or biolocation, and through hyperconjugation or no bond resonance, the release of tremendous energy results in the change in molecular structure, e.g. melting of structure, discorporation, and reincorporation of form, and so on. So, what happens when you have the Kundalini? Tremendous heat comes out of your body. Tremendous heat. In fact, you're sitting down, it can burn your seat. If you're laying down, it can burn your back. You actually get sores and welts. There's so much heat coming out of your body. I believe, and this is my personal opinion, but I believe that you continue to take this material until you can get the Kundalini energy to sustain itself continually. So it doesn't end, it's just continuous, all day long, all night long. And what happens is, at that point, you literally pass through it and out the other side. At that point, you literally achieve this condition of perfect phase conjugation in the body, everywhere. And literally, your whole body begins to function as a single atom. Okay, at that point, you have shrunken your molecular body down and climbed inside the atom, where time goes backwards and time goes forward the same. That this perfect superconducting body has literally become a single atom. And you are now an immortal. There is no time anymore. And this phase conjugation wave is what you must achieve. You must get enough of this in your body that there's perfect phase conjugation, and literally you become the perfected being. And you must pass through the Kundalini and out the other side, and there's no sensation anymore of the Kundalini. You literally have achieved a state where there is no time as we know it. There is no time forward, there is no time backwards. You literally become timeless. And from that point, people, where there is no time, there is nothing that we know in this material world can explain that condition, except you can see everything from that perspective. You can see the future, you can see the past, you can know the hearts and minds of others. It's like up on top of a mountaintop where you can see in all directions from that point. There's just a knowing that you have at that point. Really starts you thinking. If you really have faith in this, climb in the wagon. Anyway, moreover, as this high frequency resonance becomes aligned with the biotransducer system of the body, the 7 chakras can be completely transfigured into the divine image. Literally, you can become the perfect Melchizedek priest, or the Melech Zedek, or, if you like it, the enlightened being, the immortal. Okay? That's what you can achieve. At that point, all the chakras disappear, and you literally become the quantum one, the singularity, the I am. One in the Godhead, one in the body of Christ, one with the cosmic consciousness, one with all knowledge and understanding. You know, the Hebrews, they talk about the descent, the 333, the 666, the 999, back to the 12, 12, 12. That's the cycle they talk about. And we descend to the 666, the mortal man, the animalistic man. That's as far away from 12, 12, 12 as we can get. And then the reascension is the 9, and then back to the 12. It's like a clock face, make the whole cycle. The falling away, and then return back to God. Now's the time for us to get back. What was that about the 9 that Ramtha told us about? Ah, yeah, that's the way to get to God. Very good. And then the last one. Right here, this book was written in 1975, and he says, at this time, man can remove the orbital shells of electrons and positrons as quantum corpuscles of light. People in 1975, they did not know how to remove positrons without them being annihilated instantaneously. A positron is an antimatter electron. It annihilates instantaneously on production. The only way it can exist as a quantum corpuscle of light is it must be under the positive screening potential of a high-spin nucleus. Right? Okay. It ultimately advances in the pure consciousness forms of spiritual evolution. It advances into the pure consciousness forms of spiritual evolution. In essence, this is the unfoldment of living light with the Holy Spirit as it interpenetrates quantum mechanical evolutionary order with new form and attaches a function of divine purpose to the metamaterial structure of the universe as the Shekinah unfoldment. Okay, what's the Shekinah? It's the Meissner field. They knew when God was home because the Meissner field existed around the Ark of the Covenant. It could be seen from the outside. Okay? You could actually see this energy around the Ark of the Covenant. The high priest who ate of the bread of the presence of God could enter the Shekinah or the Meissner field and not collapse it because he was in resonance with it. But you let anyone else who didn't eat of this same food try to enter that magnetic field, and he would cause a resonance perturbation and a flux collapse. And now you got volts and amps. So any soldier, anybody that approached it, could just all of a sudden receive like a bolt of lightning out of it. But the high priest, they had actually, the literature that said they tie a rope around his leg, so if he got in there and he thought something bad, it could kill him, and they wouldn't be able to drag him back out without going in there. So they tied a rope around his leg. Isn't that what it says? When you're laughing, that's what it says. Anyway, right here though, it says the Holy Spirit regeneration changes extreme distortions of the spherical symmetry found in some nuclei of atomic and subatomic particles to a perfected harmony with the consciousness programs of the Elohim. Now they didn't discover this in nuclear physics until 1985-86. And here's a professor of ancient languages writing about the Holy Spirit regeneration changes extreme distortions of the spherical symmetry found in some nuclei of atomic and subatomic particles. That's just what I told you about. Asymmetrically deformed high-spin states. Until it's in perfected harmony with the conscious program of the Elohim or the angels. Verbatim. What's the odds the guy guessed at it? Well, where did he get this information then? From Enoch. Who's Enoch? The alchemical teacher. Who should know about this? Enoch should. Maybe, I don't know. Sure seemed pretty profound to me. Okay? In reviewing some of these tapes that I understand were shared with you, I find it very profound. One of the things that have always bothered me is when we give the rhodium and iridium to people, we monitor their urine. And we find that 80% of the rhodium is actually taken through their kidneys and comes out in the urine. But the iridium doesn't come out. The iridium does not dissolve in the hydrochloric acid of the stomach at all. Now there's a couple of things we've learned. The iridium seems to go into the acupuncture system and be associated with the spinal cord and the pituitary gland. Okay? Iridium is the densest, heaviest element known to man. Okay? It and osmium are the two real heavy ones. They're 22.4, 22.43, I think. Anyway, compared to gold, it's around 18.6 to 19.3, depending on which book you read. But iridium is very dense and very heavy. It seems to be the ultimate material. Gold seems to be the perfected one, the one that has the perfect proportion. If I was to make a conjecture, I believe that gold is associated with the pineal gland. I believe that iridium is associated with the pituitary gland. But we do know that rhodium is associated with the thymus. We know that when you take rhodium over a month and a half, that your thymus grows by 40%. So, the thymus is a very important gland, not only because it makes the T cells, but it also is associated with the consciousness, and also I believe you said it was aging, is that what you told me? Anyway, we do know that the thymus normally shrinks from age 12 on, and yet we find after a month and a half of taking this rhodium that in fact it grows by 40%. Now that's really profound. I mean, if you people have been studying, the effect of organs in the body, I believe that you will find that ruthenium, osmium, palladium, and platinum all affect certain organs in the chakra systems, or the level systems of the body. I think you'll find that those organs are affected. That these elements are actually part of just a balanced nutritional diet that we should be taking into our bodies. It's just like taking an iron pill. If you're deficient, you're just not in proper balance. You just don't get the right amount of it. I think that the key though here is the gold, because gold is not in your natural diet. and gold, I believe, is associated with the pineal. Okay? The concept here that we're working with, that in fact, when this guy got to the point that he began to have the Kundalini experience, he was also beginning to see these light beings. And these light beings literally were coming to him on a regular basis, and they were conveying information to him. They were teaching him. Now, I asked him, well, what were they conveying? What was it about? And he said, well, one time Methuselah comes to him. And I said, wait a minute, how do you know it's Methuselah? He says, Dave, you just know. You know who they are. They never speak. They never open their mouth. But he said, they actually are teaching you, training you, preparing you for what you have to do. And he said, Dave, we actually got to a point where I actually have started having sex with the angels. I said, wait a minute. You told me you didn't know if they were male or female. And he said, well, I still don't. He says, it isn't sex the way we think of sex. It's total union in heart and mind. Okay? Total union of heart and mind. Now, these people get to where they're so sensitive to other people's thoughts and other people's thinking that they literally begin to become very nervous if they're around too many people who are not thinking like them. And I've seen that in the relationship between males and females, that the relationship begins to move to different levels. And it's very important that both people involved in the relationship are totally aware of what's happening and agree to it. But I really believe that what I've seen is that these people can see, they can literally cut cards and know the suit and the number. They can tell you who will come to see them 3 and 4 days in advance, what they're going to want to talk about, what they're going to want to discuss. And these things are not explainable by science. There's no way the standard physical science can explain this. The only way you can know this is if you are altering time. And when you understand that the consciousness resides where there is no time, as we know it. But as the spirit body grows and grows and grows until this light body is as large as or larger than the physical body, now the physical body is under the control of the light body. That once the light body exceeds the size of the material body, that you get around at this perfect Meissner field, or no external magnetic field can penetrate the physical body. And at that point, you are in this world, but you're not of this world. Okay, you are there, but you're not really part of the world. And at that point, you literally can levitate, you can biolocate, you can disappear here and reappear over there. Because you really are not separated like it appears to you. It's just literally going to light and disappearing and reappearing back as light and solidifying over there. Anywhere that your mind can think you would like to be, you can go in your mind, but now your physical body has to go with you. Pretty incredible. Did you know that when we begin to do analysis on natural products, that not only we find that it was in grape juice, it was in carrot juice, it's in aloe vera, it's in pycnogenol, it's in the DHEA precursor that makes the Mexican wild yam. But we also analyzed the vibhuti, the Sai Baba manifest, and actually we found out the vibhuti is iridium in the high spin state. The very same stuff that I showed you disappears from these 3 dimensions. And his whole body is just saturated with this stuff. And they claim he can biolocate. They claim he can be in multiple locations at the same time. Now, I don't believe there's mysticism here. I don't believe there's the cult here. I believe that science can't explain this. And it's my opinion that he is eating that ash that comes from the sacred pyres. And the reason I say this is he takes this into his body and he regurgitates up what they call the lingam. Okay? It's called the lingam. Iridium in the high spin state, when you put it in hydrochloric acid, forms an insoluble polymer. that won't dissolve, and so you can regurgitate it back up. You take a lot and actually get a polymer that's gelatinous looking and will dry to a stone. That's where the lingam comes from. Now, what is it? They call it like a seminal material. Okay? All this is, people, is the science of the occult. It's the science of something we haven't been able to explain, but now we finally get to the point where we explain it. To literally understand what the spirit atoms actually are. And when you find out the truth of it, you actually find out that in fact it's a totally new form of matter, but it contains the balance of the opposites, the yin and the yang. It's the nothing that's everything. It's the nothing within us that makes us what we are. It's God that resides inside every one of us. And the spooky thing about it is science has finally figured it out. They're finally getting there at long last. And so what I tell people is, I don't care whether you believe it or not, because it's coming. You know, it is in fact the spirit atoms. And so I think that I need to tell you again that is in fact what I came up with. I wrestled this for years. When I began to do these presentations to people, I couldn't figure out how that I was ever going to raise the money to get this plant built. I'd spent all my money getting this technology developed, but I didn't know how to get the plant built. And I figured I would find somebody who'd put up the money and there'd be no problem at all, and I couldn't find a single wealthy investor. So I finally said, well, everybody always came up to me afterwards. They said, Dave, we'd like to help. We'd like to help. What can we do? How can we help? So what I've done is, some of you have already heard this, but I'm going to repeat it again, is I've actually organized a company called Ormus, the Limited Liability Corporation. Ormus is an Arizona company. Ormus is going to own the plant. They own the office. They own the property where it's all going to be produced. It's called Ormus LLC. Ormus has allocated 25% of their production of this material to the Science of the Spirit Foundation. The Science of the Spirit Foundation is selling $500 memberships to people to raise the money to build a plant. The Science of the Spirit Foundation has members in the Science of the Spirit Foundation. So for $500, you can acquire 1/5,000th of the $2.5 million we're raising to build a plant. That's where we came up with the numbers. $500 times 5,000 is $2.5 million. So, for a $500 contribution, you can buy one membership. For $1,000, you buy two memberships in the Science of the Spirit Foundation, and they will receive 1/5,000th of 25% of the production. If we produce 1 ton a day of rock, which is a teeny tiny little pilot, but if we produce 1 ton a day, we will have about 1,500 ounces of rhodium and iridium per day. 1,500 ounces times 31,000 milligrams means we'll have about 47 million milligrams per day. That divided by 5,000, by 1/4 means we'll have somewhere around 11 to 12 million milligrams per day that will go to the Science of the Spirit Foundation. That divided by 5,000 means 23 to 2,400 milligrams per day is what the allocation will be per membership, and that's a minimum allocation. In addition, you will get the platinum, the palladium, the ruthenium, the osmium, and the gold at the rate of 1/5,000th of 25% of the production. That will come every day into your account. It will not be distributed every day because I can't afford to do that. So we'll probably distribute about quarterly. Every 90 days a shipment will be sent to your address of however many memberships you own. And you will get the rhodium, the iridium, the platinum, palladium, the ruthenium, the osmium, and the gold. Okay? You have 3 options. You can take the sacramental material, which cannot be analyzed by any commercial laboratory, so it has no commercial value. You can donate the material to science, and I will equal your donation by doubling it. So if you say, Dave, send it to this cancer research or send it to this AIDS research, I'll send it there and I'll send another like amount in your name. So it doubles if you give it away. And the third option is anytime you decide, you can take your membership out of the Science of Spirit and move it into the Ormus group, where we will be making metal catalysts for fuel cells, ceramic refractories for jet engines, chlorine generation for iridium, for the chlorine for the saltwater generation of electrolyzed chlorine, which is used in polymers and plastics, et cetera, et cetera. Anyway, these are all the conventional technologies for the metals themselves, not the elements, but the metals. You should make somewhere around $50 a day will be your profit if you elect to go over in the Ormus group, which isn't too bad for a $500 investment. When we scale up, if we go to 20 ton a day or 50 ton a day, your investment scales by that percentage without any further investment. Anytime you want your money back, prior to going into production, all you have to do is write me a letter and I'll return your money back. Okay? When we receive your money, after 3 weeks, which is 15 banking days, to be sure your check clears, then we'll send you a receipt. It will tell you the company name. It'll tell you that the Ormus is producing the material, that they're giving 25% of their production to the Science of Spirit, and you bought this many shares out of 5,000 in the Science of Spirit Foundation. It'll give you the federal tax ID number and what it represents in that company. Okay. In addition, you'll receive monthly newsletters from me as to what's going on, what medical research is going on, what studies are going on philosophically, who's conducting the studies, and what the results are showing. You'll get 24 of these newsletters over the period of 2 years, so that when this material comes to you, you'll know how much you want to take, what you want to take, or what you want to do with it, or if you even want it or not. It's your option. Okay? We are currently doing a study under the Alternative Medicine Division of NIH. It's actually studying 30 HIV patients in New York with this, doing the confirmation under NIH. We have 10 people down in Ashland, Oregon, who are under doctor's auspices doing the philosophical studies, totally being monitored by the doctors. We have doctors at Clemson University in Georgia who are working with cell culture studies. We have a DNA researcher in Iowa who is working with the DNA aspects of it, doing cell culture studies. These are the standard medical credentials that are doing their work. And basically, I'm not doing any studies myself right now. I did just enough work that I could see what was happening, and I decided this is too serious for me to be working with anymore. I better turn it over to someone who knows what he's doing. As you know, the work is considered illegal if you do it to cure diseases. So you must remember, this is not a medicine. This is here to enlighten and raise man's consciousness. If in doing that it happens to cure diseases, hallelujah for the Spirit. I believe that if I'm prosecuted in a court of law, that I can raise a reasonable doubt in the court's mind that in fact this is the Spirit and it is the elements of the Spirit, and that it is not analyzable by standard analysis, therefore how can they prosecute me? When you understand that it is not under the realm of the FDA and the AMA to relegate or control things of the Spirit, that we have a separation of church and state in this country. And so they've got a very interesting litigation on their hands when they come after me. I welcome the contest. Anyway, that's it in a nutshell. I will answer or try to answer any questions. If anybody has any questions, we would like for you to address your questions through a microphone, which is where? Okay, back here, the microphone.
My question has to do with the concentration of the rhodium and iridium monoatomic in the food sources and other supplement sources that was on that list that you handed out last week, week and a half ago. At the top of the list is grape juice and carrot juice. And when you spoke last time, you mentioned that the bioavailability of the rhodium and iridium was decreased by the high sugar content of those two juices. And I was curious about two things. First of all is, what is the source of that information or that belief? What's that based on, the sense that the bioavailability is reduced?
It's based on just the people that I've talked to who have taken these materials and the results that they've seen from taking them. I don't believe, given the numbers we're seeing in there, that all of it is being available. And so I'm assuming that a portion of it is being tied up. I don't have any scientific data as to how it's going on. It's just people who have done it. However, you know, there are lots of people who have published books on grape, on grape juice diets to cure cancer.
Right.
There are also people who swear they've taken carrot juice and cured cancer.
Right.
And so, you know, I assume if you drink enough of it, you know, that there is a benefit, but certainly it doesn't appear like if you take that many milligrams in that analysis and then take that many milligrams of the pure powder from me, you don't get the same response. So I'm assuming that it's all not being available.
Well, the reason I asked the question is because grape juice and carrot juice are a lot less expensive and more available
certainly
than some of the others. One of the things that I was wondering whether or not you had considered was that grape juice, in order to take the grape juice out of sugar easily, you can turn it into red wine. And many of us here have probably heard a certain teacher mention the potential effects of a glass of red wine. And of course, if you're concerned about the alcohol, if you heat it up to a moderate temperature, you can actually even get rid of the ethanol. And the question that I had that had to do with this is whether or not you would think that in red wine, because I guess you haven't tested, it's not on the list, but whether or not you would think or expect that the rhodium and iridium from Concord grape juice would be lost in its conversion into red wine by bacteria.
I would not expect it to be lost if it's being converted to wine. In fact, my attorney is a connoisseur of fine wines, and he said, Dave, he's delighted to find out that of all the materials we've analyzed, that wine is the only material that contains gold.
Oh, really?
The grape juice and wine is the only one that contains, and this is minute amounts. Don't go out and wriggle out so you can get a lot of gold.
No problem.
But it does contain very small amounts, but it does contain gold.
I guess that's why words of wisdom come from winos on the corner sometime.
Well, I think that the reason is the root is very deep,
Yeah.
and it's many years, you know, sitting there, the same plant with the root going down deep, and it does draw nutrients from, you know, a big area of the earth. And normally grapes are grown on mountainsides, you know, rocky mountainsides where there's a lot of mineralization.
Right. With respect to the bioavailability, one thing I wanted to propose to you is that you might consider, if you haven't already done it, either the sublingual or intranasal route, because those have the potential to bypass the liver and loss of...
We've tried them, and the material just is totally inert. And so, you know, you point out the no bond resonance aspect. We find that when we do analysis on tissue, back at MIU, we analyzed ATP, GTP, DNA, RNA, and yet we find it's not associated with any of those complexes of the tissue, and yet it's 5% by dry matter weight in the tissue. Well, the conclusion we've come to is these elements are associated with the aqueous phase. They're not chemically bound to any aspect, and they're actually in the body in the aqueous phase. And it's a resonance transfer into the cell. It's not a chemical bond. Okay.
Yes, I wondered if you would address Dr. Merkel's life crystals and how they equate to the white powder gold.
Sure. I became aware of Merkel's work about 7 or 8 years ago. We actually bought some life crystals, analyzed the life crystals. The life crystals are gold.
Wow.
And he's actually distilling the gold from the grape juice. That's how he comes up with what he calls live crystals. However, when you buy live crystals, you have to hold it up in the sunlight to even look through the water and see the little bit of crystalline material in there. He tells you that it's ATP. That's what he tells you it is. But you take that and put it in fuming sulfuric acid, nitric, nitric, nitric to take care of whatever carbon forms, then water, 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 down to fumes of sulfuric and down to a minimum of acid, the dilute up with water, and there's a live crystal still there. That's not ATP.
Right. Does this going through the bloodstream instead of the digestive system alter the gold in any way? And is it as potent as the white powder gold?
The gold and the iridium do not go through the normal digestive system in the hydrochloric acid and into as a chloride in the blood. I believe that iridium and gold go in through the meridian system, and science doesn't even acknowledge it exists. So, you know, where's the mechanism? I have come to understand that in fact the iridium and the gold, actually it's a resonance transfer in the body that occurs from these elements. And so I believe that the attributes of the iridium and the gold is not actually like nutritional. It doesn't go in as food would go into the blood. It actually is a resonance transfer from the stomach, from the, the digestive system here, into the body is the way it occurs. And I think that even Ramtha said that it's that this is a light transfer phenomenon and a changing of the vibrational resonance is where we're supposed to go to.
Well, I have done life crystals, and it's definitely a sense of well-being that enters into the body when it's taken, and it does make the brain open. All of a sudden you understand things, you have clarity, you have psychicness, but it's not like getting high. I mean, you just have a sense of well-beingness.
I find it very interesting in the people who take this, who have had Parkinson's disease, had Lou Gehrig's disease, had the AIDS virus, very ill, that when they take this, they say after like 2 or 3 months, they say there's just a filling. There's like a completeness in themselves. And I said, you mean like it's nutritional? He said, no, it's not food. It's like there's a part of them that wasn't there before that now is completed.
Well, life crystals are very, very difficult to get. The only thing is they're more accessible to us at this moment than the white powder gold. So my question still is, how does it equate? Is it this equivalent? Would we be doing the same thing if we could take life crystals?
If you filter the life crystals out, I would say it's in the neighborhood of 80% by weight of what you have on the filter paper is actually gold.
So how would you do that filtering?
Get you a 0.1 micron millipore filter.
Understood.
A millipore filter, and just filter it through that, and then weigh what's there, and how many fractions of a milligram it weighs, that's what you got.
Okay.
Around 80% of that. I just feel like it's such a minuscule amount for what you really need. If you're getting those kind of sensations out of that, wait till you get a tablespoon of this.
20 months is too long. Thank you.
Okay.
What's the difference between the white powder of gold and the red lion powder?
I'm not really sure. You cannot get to the red lion without making the white first, and we have made the red from the white. But we've never administered the white to anybody other than myself, and I've never given the red to anyone.
Okay. At your last talk, you had mentioned that it takes 9 months for this stuff to rest or do something, and that lady had asked a question, what happens in that 9 months? And you mentioned it takes that long to turn it back into a metal or something, and I didn't quite understand your answer of why there's that 9-month waiting period after the white powder is made.
For getting to the metal?
Yeah,
it's a resonance transfer into the nucleus. And we form the complex that should work, and if you take that immediately out of solution and try to get metal, it doesn't work. But we left it just by accident for about 8-9 months, and then we took it and it goes back to metal. And so we said, gee, this is really unusual. Now that I want monatomic, all I get is metal. But when I wanted metal, all I could get was monoatomic. And what we find is there is a resonance transfer into the nucleus. And it's like if you can imagine applying a brake to a fast spinning wheel, and over a period of time it slows down until you get down to a point that it actually is in a high enough energy state, it'll go to metal. And until you get it up to that temperature, it just will not go to metal. And so we know it happens in 8 to 9 months.
Okay. Just one other thing. When you have a distended nucleus of gold, if it actually splits apart, what 2 elements does it turn into?
Gold becomes iron.
And what's the other one?
I'm not sure. It's actually that article in Scientific American lists all the elements and what they fragment into.
Okay.
And that's it's in a nice colored chart. So just get the book and look at all of them. They'll tell you what all of them go to.
Thank you.
Okay. Yes.
Again, thanks a lot for coming. A couple of observations and then a question. Not sure if you're familiar with work done by Dr. Kerry Reams shortly after the turn of the century.
No.
Dealing with frequency. It may be a gentleman you might want to take a closer look at. Also, Dr. Van Nordstrom from Sweden, in terms of looking at the body as an electrical entity.
You're talking about Nordstrom?
Yeah, Van Nordstrom, yes, from Sweden.
What's the first name?
Van. Kirk Van Nordstrom.
Oh, I'm not familiar with that one either.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. In their work, and our work here of looking at the body as a hydroelectric plant, and of course with superconductors, Reams tends to lean in the direction, or has proven that we live off of the electricity or the frequency given off by the minerals and vitamins that we're able to absorb. Keeping that in mind, and another observation with the indigenous people around the world in several settings, find that if you take the urine, it can be easily converted into medicinal gold. Keeping that in mind, and there's some references in the Bible in that respect also, and some mythical things in terms of Jason the Golden Fleece, etc. But keeping that in mind, you wonder, knowing that the body is a superconductor, that perhaps it doesn't matter what mineral element we take in, i.e. whether it's from a carrot, whether it's from celery, etc., that any of that could be conducted if the proper frequency is applied to the body, i.e. done with the mind, i.e. raising the kundalini through ways ones have learned to do, or through external means, that one could in fact perhaps take a carrot and convert it into, just picking one, rubidium, simply by raising the frequency of that particular element, with the body itself being a superconductor. Also referencing, so again, taking in mineral-wise and being able, by being a superconductor, to convert that to the frequency elements it needs to be, matching them up with the different endocrine glands, commonly known as the seals, each of which have a frequency that they respond to. And keeping in mind, that would be internally, but also referenced in ancient texts, would be the application of different gemstones on the breastplates, etc., also to match the glands in the body. And in an external way, I guess, would be the process of attempting to raise the frequency of those glands or seals, i.e. from an external way. Having said all that, the question of perhaps, and understanding you have a very good powder that you've discovered, but perhaps it can be manufactured and produced from many different sources, and of which you've discovered one major one, but perhaps the body being the superconductor that it is, that it can convert other elements into the manna. Kareem, or Dr. Ali's earlier question about the grapes, and even looking at them in their physical structure, they're in a cluster format, and most of the fruits that grow on the vine are in clusters, and we look at the micro-cluster nature of the grape, the raspberry, many of which are red or, give off an ultraviolet blue of that color. I sort of throw it out for thought. I didn't know whether or not you had examined it any, closer than that, but it would seem to me that there would be many elements that, with this miraculous body that we have, and with the appropriate focused frequency, that one could convert almost any element into the manna and perhaps the wine or the blood.
Okay, well, there's just a couple things I'd like to say. First of all, there are two bodies. There's a physical body and a light body.
Correct.
And what you just described about vitamins, minerals, nutrients, and all is correct for the physical body. Absolutely correct. And you need all of these to have a healthy physical body. It's the light body that is the issue that I've been dealing with, and it's a physical impossibility for any of the other elements on the periodic table to go to the high spin state. They do not go to the high spin state. Now, maybe it's possible that the superconducting body could take elements to that state.
That's my point.
I certainly have not been able to do it, and I certainly can't explain how it would happen.
I mean, when you're getting calcium and silica, et cetera, some of the, or iron and aluminum, et cetera, out of the gold,
But they only come from heavier elements. They fragment down to it. I've never seen it go back up. Now there are alchemists who claim that's possible, but none of them can show it to me.
Okay.
So I think you have to have these higher elements to fragment down, but I haven't seen them come back. I do find it very phenomenal that in fact many of these people who achieved this enlightenment in fact can manifest things out of the air. Just bring them into existence.
It should all be the same.
It should all be the same. And so I'm not saying it isn't so. I'm just saying I won't know till we get there, and then we'll find out.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Yes.
This is in reference to the food sources. For instance, you mentioned last visit Ayurvedic herbal formula Kalash, or otherwise known as Amla. Have you tested that formula?
Yes. Yes. It was introduced to me as M4 and M5. M4 being the look like axle grease, the Kalash.
Yeah.
And then the M5 being the large horse capsules like this. And I was told by John Fagan at MIU that those were the very best Ayurvedic medicines they had. And when we analyzed it, there was lots of rhodium and iridium in both of those. John was in awe. He just says, Dave, nobody knows this. And I said, that's right, John, that's why I'm bringing it to you. And so he took this information, and Hagelin went over to the Maharishi with it and shared this information with him and told him about what we were doing. The Maharishi Mahesh Yogi, who never has endorsed a Western technology, said this is the stuff that will allow us to live 1,000 years. So if you put store in what he says, that's what Hagelin says he said.
It's known as an anti-aging formula, so.
That's correct. And so, it's one of the best sources of rhodium iridium that I've come across, but I understand it's a combination of many, many herbs is the way that's made. So it's a great product, though, as a natural product goes. Amri Kalash, I think?
Amla or Kalash.
Kalash?
It's more often known as Amla after its main ingredient. Okay. Okay. Oh, okay. I had another question about the Isiac tea you said was high in oxalic acid. And isn't it true that you can eliminate the oxalic acid when you cook the tea, as you do eliminate that from vegetables that have it?
I guess that if you boiled it long enough, yeah, you can get rid of the oxalic acid. There's lots of other things in it that would get to be a problem if you're going to say, I'm going to drink this tea and get enough of these elements. But you drink the tea 6 to 8 ounces every day, and I'll tell you, you really get a buzz on it. It'll begin to put you up there. So,
okay,
and also the products, they're made down by the Emprise Corporation, the Man Aloe and the Manipole. Also, if you take 15 to 20 capsules a day of those, you really get to going too in your meditations and your consciousness. It just really gets with the program.
And there's just one more question about the teas. The Vitality that's available is the same herbs as the Isiac, except they've just added watercress.
Yeah, there's watercress and one more that I don't remember the name.
Red clover is not in this formula that's available, but it's in others, if that's it.
Well, I can't tell you what the other one is that he uses, but if anybody's interested in that product too, you can call Don. His phone number is in Arizona. It's Don Duke. He makes the Vitality, and he'll be happy to talk to you about it. And he's area code 602-374-5744. And he actually is trained as a master's chemist, and you can ask him all about it. He can talk to you about natural products. He cannot talk to you about the white powder. So don't ask him. It's not fair. He has signed a confidentiality agreement. He can't talk about it.
And have you tested colloidal silver and colloidal gold?
Well, the colloidal gold, I don't think you'll find anybody who truly has colloidal gold. You can make gold chloride. There is colloidal silver. That's been known for 150 years as an antiseptic and has medicinal properties. What you've got to understand is the word colloidal is not a technical word. It's not a scientific word. It's like the word a bunch or a little bit. You know, it's not specific. And so when you make colloidal silver, you must remember that colloidal silver, if you get the cluster size small enough, it will totally disaggregate to the monomer. But how much of it went and how much of it hasn't gone, and it's that hasn't gone that's a poison. And so if you take very much of it, you're running the risk of being poisoned. And so, you know, I walk very carefully if you're talking about high amounts. If you're going to stay with low amounts, I'm sure it's okay. But don't get in the high amounts. You could be poisoned by it.
Thank you.
Okay? Yes?
Greetings, David. I commend you on your journey. As a veterinarian, ever since your last talk, I've had my share of people requiring about the ace mannin. And first of all, I have to ask you, are you, as you know, you probably know, it's an injectable form.
That's
and
correct.
People need to know this. I'm taking the opportunity. It's an intraperitoneal form or intralesional, which means in the abdomen or in the lesion. Now, I asked Carrington Laboratories about this. They gave me an answer, but they didn't give me an answer. Can that at all be taken orally?
Can it be?
Yes.
Certainly.
That's what I felt
But
from your last talk.
Yeah, it's not as powerful if it's taken by direct injection, but because you only get, at best, 80% if you're totally fasting. I'd say if you're eating foods, you probably only get 40–50% into your bloodstream.
Okay, I'm thinking of more on the animal basis. Instead of giving the injectable form, give it an oral form.
Yeah, it just won't. It's quite expensive, and
Right.
you wouldn't want to lose any of the effect if you could inject it. I wouldn't think.
Okay.
That's the only thing. If you can afford it, do it.
No, and I'm bringing that up question then because it came to me after your last lecture. I thought perhaps it could be consumed animal-wise orally and get that benefit instead of
Well, for the benefit of
injecting.
those people who don't understand, there is a product made by Carrington Laboratories called Ace Mannin. And Ace Mannin, I have purchased it, analyzed it, and it is 90% rhodium. And they actually make the Ace Mannin from the aloe vera plant, and they've concentrated that aspect of aloe vera that affects the cancer cure. And they know that this they call glucopolysaccharide. And it's not glucopolysaccharide, it's 90% rhodium. It may be 10% glucopolysaccharide, but you know, for those people who don't know what we're talking about, that's what we're talking about.
Okay, and then one other comment with that, I think I should also take the opportunity, since I've been having my share of people come to me, is that, as you fellow masters know, for the sake of impeccability, I don't purchase it for human consumption, and that I will help you with your animals, but I will not purchase it for human use. Thank you.
Okay. Yes.
Hi, David. A personal question I have, in taking the white powder, I have a prosthesis, cobalt and titanium, a sizable amount of metal in my body. And in taking the white powder, would this affect the body, having that amount of metal in the body?
It's my opinion that, in fact, you have right now junk DNA, that they don't know what role it performs in your body.
What was that called?
It's called junk DNA. This is what the people in science call it.
Okay.
And the reason is, if they take it out of your body still seems to be the same. And so nobody understands why those aspects of your DNA are in your body. I believe that when you get to this enlightened state, that all of the DNA begins to function. And I believe that all of your brain begins to function, not the 6 to 8% you have now. I think it all begins to function. You will be distinctly different. I think everything changes from the very basic level of the DNA all the way up to the cell structure. Everything all becomes different. So, are you going to be affected? I don't care what you have, you're going to be affected.
Oh, well, I would expect and hope that that would be true, but would it be detrimental having that amount of metal in the body?
You don't have enough that it could ever be a problem, or you wouldn't be standing here, so don't worry about it.
Excellent. They mentioned teeth and having to take the metal out of a teeth. The amount of metal I have in my leg and hip, you could take care of great many mouths with that.
Yeah,
So,
I think that if you have metal, I mean, people ask, what about my hysterectomy? You know, what about my vasectomy? What about my hip socket replacement? I've got
That's
a
what I'm
plastic
speaking of.
joint. You know, all I can tell you is over the next 2 years, we're going to find out a whole lot of these answers.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for all of
Okay.
your work into this, too.
Yes.
Hi, yeah, before I ask this second question regarding the MA4 and MA5, there were a lot of people that were asking questions, and when you mentioned it before, I was the one. The name of the product